Maintenance workers. What's the weirdest thing you've seen inside someone's home? I was on a ride along with a fire department. We responded to smell of smoke in an apartment building. We found the apartment fast enough because the fire alarm was going off inside. We walk in to find this guy naked passed out on the floor in front of the TV with adult film on way louder than it should be and the remnants of a pizza in the oven. The gentleman I questioned was very drunk. There were beer cans all over the kitchen and a bottle of liquor on the floor next to him. To wake him up, we actually all left, and the fire chief woke him in his daily uniform so he didn't think he was being abducted. Story 2. So this isn't weird, but it was the most shocking. I was working with adults with intellectual disabilities that lived in residential homes. It was one of my first weeks in the job, and a coworker was taking me out to a home to show me what she did when she did home reviews. We get to the house, open the door, and we are instantly hit with a wall of air smelling like feces. 2 steps in, and it was apparent. There was diarrhea on a chair, on the carpet, and random splotches all over. The whole house was in shambles. The fridge was full of moldy foods, and I'll never forget picking up the shredded cheese, shaking the bag, and seeing green mold flakes go up and down. Food was splattered all over the cabinets. The beds were stained with urine and feces, and expired canned food was found everywhere. The staff there had been neglecting those guys for a long time, and no one had bothered to check up on them. Story 3. Used to work for a concrete company, and our mixer trucks would sometimes damage property. Typically, my partner and I did maintenance on the plants, but we'd get sent to job sites to unduck whatever the drivers did. So while at one house, we had to tear up the driveway, replace the culvert, and re-pour the end of the driveway. The first day we were there, all the old Snoopy neighbors were standing around watching us, and I had to piss pretty bad. So I asked the homeowner if I could use his bathroom. He said sure, and led me through his house, past a bathroom, into the bathroom in the master bedroom. Already creeped out by that. Oh, also I noticed cameras all over the place. Some pointed out windows, some pointed into the rooms. Creep factor leveled up. So he leads me to the bathroom, opens the door, and holds it for me, like you would at a store when someone is behind you. I say thanks. He still stands there. I had to walk past him and yank the door closed. While leaving, I noticed a bedroom decked out in kid stuff. This would normally not toss up any flags. Grandkid's room, probably, right? But with all the added creepiness, just didn't seem normal at all. Told my partner. He laughed and pointed out there was probably cameras in the bathroom. If either of us had to piss after that, we drove down to the gas station. So this was around 15 years ago. We are talking camcorders on tripods, not your cutesy nanny cams. Old guy was single, and this wasn't a very kid-friendly setup as far as foster homes go. The part about him holding the door for the bathroom. Imagine going to a restaurant and there's a group of people with you and you hold the door open for them. This was what I was talking about. Except he didn't seem to have any intentions on closing it, hence me snatching it from him. Story 4. Service plumber here. At the house of an elderly lady, at least 75 years old, and there's naked pictures of her on all the walls and several sex toy all about. It was interesting. Story 5. I do construction sales, so I'm in homes a lot. For me, it's the sheer number of preppers that exist today. Walk into a suburban America basement and bam, 24 buckets full of survival food, or ammo stuffed into every alcove and rafter. It's definitely not just the ones you expect. Story 6. Back in the early 90s, I worked for a company that removed old electric water heaters and replaced them with propane-powered water heaters. Because propane water heaters can possibly spew carbon monoxide, there are state regulations as to where the water heaters can and can't be placed. So it was my job to inspect the water heater room and draw up plans for ventilation, if necessary. I showed up at a client's home to inspect the area where he had his water heater to see if we needed to install any vents. When I asked to see his current water heater, he seemed a little uncomfortable and said, "I have something in the room that I forgot to clean up." I followed him to the room, and when he opened the door, the smell of weed hit me. In the water heater room, he had fishing lines strung up with trimmed plants being dried. If I were to guess, there must have been a couple pounds of weed drying in there. He said, "Oops, sorry about that." I smiled and told him, "No problem. I don't even know what that is." I knew exactly what it was, but I didn't want the guy to get worried about me telling someone. He offered me some, but I told him, "No thanks. I don't know what that is." As I was leaving, he asked me, "You aren't going to tell anyone about the plants, are you?" I asked, "What plants?" The guy smiled, then said, "You sure you don't want some?" I definitely wanted some, but I was still pretty new at my job, so I didn't want to take the chance that accepting weed from him would blow up in my face. Before I left, I told him, "Make sure you clear that closet before our guys arrive. They might not be happy about the plants I didn't see." Story 7. As a maintenance guy at a large apartment complex, I've seen some crap. Naked people, really gross people, but no dead people. I remember doing an emergency water repair and had to go into an occupied unit. It was the strangest thing. It was pretty much empty, dirty, but empty, like no one lives there, no furniture, not even a bed, just a crafty mattress on the floor, and some clothes scattered around, and at least 30 pairs of Nike shoes, all sorts of weird colors. Like this guy had no TV or couch, but had a collection of expensive shoes, all the same size from what I could tell. IDK, it wasn't as bad as a few hoarder units we had. Story 8. Worked as a furniture delivery guy for a rent-to-own place in Iowa for a couple of years, and I saw some absolutely crazy crap. We were delivering a couch to someone, and when we arrived, there was no answer to our knocking. We called our manager back at the store and explained that no one was home. He tells us to hang out for a minute while he tries getting in touch with the customer. While we're waiting, we start hearing this weird sort of screeching sound coming from a detached garage. We decided to investigate the noise. We turned the corner to the front of the garage and came face to face with the meanest, scariest-looking monkey I've ever seen. It was in the garage, but they had like this wire fence keeping it inside. The entire garage was its cage. I have no idea what type of monkey it was. It was large and very angry. Story 9. Checking fire alarms, testing emergency bedside buttons in a nursing home that are like individual little apartments. Opened the door to stench of death and sure enough lady who passed away. Been there about 2 days. Yes, the bedside button worked fine. No, nobody was in trouble for her not being found for 2 days. This specific place is very independent. They have their own cars and are free to come and go as they please, and the only time someone comes by is for any sort of maintenance or if they have visitors stop by. Story 10. I worked as a delivery driver for a Deliver Anything company in the early 2000s. At the time, it was a very novel, but ultimately unsustainable idea for a business back then. We had a lot of regular weirdos. One night, one of these weirdos ordered about $30 worth of candles from the dollar store. This job really brought to the forefront the disconnects that exist in us as consumers. So of course, initially I had gotten the wrong kind of candles for the weirdo. He showed me what he wanted at his apartment door. Luckily, the store was literally a couple blocks away, so I didn't have to waste much time because I wasn't being paid hourly. Come in was what I was greeted with when I returned, which is never something I'm particularly happy about as a delivery person. I see what my rational brain tells me is a pile of laundry on a coffee table in front of a filthy couch, but it's not that. It's a 3-foot-tall wax pile. I had bought candles in jars the first time, and I could definitely see why those would not work for our gentleman. He needed freestanding candles so he could just plop one down and light it to continue building his wax mountain, which was starting to spill onto the floor. A less weird but more awkward experience I had with this man was him literally falling asleep mid-signature for his Burger King. Story 11. A plane. Dude was refurbishing a light aircraft in his lounge. It was only the fuselage. The wings were outside. That's certainly the weirdest. Story 12. I used to install smoke alarms for the hearing impaired, 50% elderly and 50% deaf, all over the state of Oklahoma. I would get addresses for the installations the week before and plan routes accordingly, meaning I would just put the addresses into Google and check out the Earth map views. This place I'm thinking of was in the middle of nowhere, which is saying something considering that the entire state of Oklahoma is in the middle of nowhere. When my ASL interpreter and I made the trip, we had to ramp our minivan over a nearly washed-out bridge, bounce down a forest road, and choose which of 3 broken-down trailers these people were using as shelter. Looking back, we really should have just called it before ramping the bridge. Once there, we met the people and they explained, in ASL through my interpreter, that they had a tornado rip through their home that ended up sparking a fire somehow. That explanation never made it through translation. Since then, they had decided to be more fire safety conscious, which I applaud. But their home had holes in the roof the size of people. One wall was just a tapestry of duct-taped trash bags. I didn't feel right just installing fancy smoke alarms when they clearly needed much more help, but there wasn't anything I could do. So I'm doing the only thing I can do: installing smoke alarms, explaining basic fire safety, teaching them to use their bed-shaking devices. These folks were deaf. And when I start to explain that they should exit the home without stopping to grab anything including pets, they stopped me and explained that their pet is very valuable, as in it had a monetary value. I'm not one to pry, so I took this at face value and reiterated the importance of leaving the home immediately if it is on fire, especially because it's a trailer home. They had a long, silent conversation with my interpreter during which she looked more and more concerned. The occupants go into a room I hadn't yet entered and emerged with a damn bald eagle on a leash. Crap's illegal. Story 13. I had a neighbor who offered me money to clean her apartment. She had mental health issues and got some kind of subsidy from the county for home assistance, which she didn't like. But she had an inspection coming up for continuing her other benefits. So, I walked in and there were dishes everywhere, glasses with dried stuff in the bottom, pizza boxes that smelled of old cheese in stacks, ashtrays piled so high they were pyramids of butts, beer cans and bottles scattered. Went into the kitchen and both sinks are piled up past the faucet. One side has water in it that's covered in a white film. The kitchen trash can had overflowed to the floor and has flies buzzing around it. Gross. But I needed the money, so I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. After I got the dishes under control, I moved on to the stove. Oven. When I opened the door, the entire bottom of the oven was crawling with maggots. The wave of smell was enough to about knock me on my ass, and I ran out gagging. Went home, got a mask, went back, and finished cleaning up. I still cannot figure out what she did to that oven. There was no food inside and looked like it had never been used. Story 14. This lady had 7 huge birds, parrots, etc., all without cages and crafting directly onto the floor. It only had the pad that goes under carpet, and everything had seeped through. It was horrible. She just got a German Shepherd puppy also, and then proceeded to show me her machete collection. Had a dope-ass classic Airstream in the backyard, though. My coworker called animal control on her, but we ended up closing her case shortly after, so not sure whatever happened. Story 15. Not exactly weird, but cool. Knocked on the door and didn't get a response. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in to find a 90-year-old woman in her dressing gown head banging to Led Zeppelin. Story 16. I was an estate agent, realtor, for rental properties, and I had a few wild moments. Top 2 were when I had been okayed by a member of a male couple to let myself in for a flat viewing one Saturday morning. But he must have forgotten to tell his husband, because when I opened the door to the bedroom with my boyfriend middle-aged couple, we found one of the tenants having a sex against the wall without a stitch on them, and only 5 feet away. Still no idea how we didn't hear them before we opened the door. The other one was similar, but I was there to take photos, and the tenant, an elderly and overweight woman, forgot I was coming, so guess I found in the bath. Story 17. I used to be a house painter. One weekend was working, with my female partner, at a house for a woman and her toddler daughter. The daughter was chatty and cute, mostly sat on the couch watching TV, but would talk to us while we worked. I was on my knees painting some trim with my back to the daughter when she said, "Look at me." I turned around and saw her on the couch wrapped in a blanket. She opened the blanket and said, "I'm naked." I immediately turned back around and said loudly, "I don't need to see that." From the other room, her mom yelled out, "Is she taking her clothes off again?" At the end of the day, we were laughing about it with the mother, and I said, "She's going to be really popular when she gets older." Luckily, she took it well. Story 18. I worked for Pizza Hut many years ago. I had to deliver to a house that was as normal as can be on the outside. I knocked on the door, and a guy wearing only silk boxers answered. He was slightly overweight, but looked. He was smuggling a damn baseball bat in his boxers. He was casual and asked me to step inside for a second as he had to get his wallet. I take one step inside, and this extremely hot lady came around the corner. She was obviously not wearing a bra, and her robe was barely closed. One of her steps flapped open her robe enough to know that she shaved her down below. I looked behind her, and you could see a video camera set up on a tripod, so it was obvious what they were doing. The guy hands me the money with a good-sized tip, no pun intended, and tells me that he appreciated me bringing the food. I said, "No problem, have fun doing what you're doing, and if you need a cameraman, let me know." I don't even remember thinking the last part until it was coming out of my mouth. He just kind of laughed and said, "Maybe next time, my dude." The girl just laughed a little, and I left. Damn, the bad luck. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done if they said, "Yeah, let's do this." Story 19. Years ago, I used to deliver and set up furniture of all sorts. Not that weird, but I used to find vibrators and dildos under mattresses all the fragging time. I would stand the mattress up against the wall and they'd be laid out there. I'd simply tell the homeowner, "I gotta grab some tools from the truck. If there's anything you need to clean up, no W is the time to do it." I'd come back in and the sex toys would be gone. Every time. And they would never say a word about it. It wasn't a big deal. I just didn't want to handle them if the homeowner was home. They would be a little embarrassed, no eye contact, red cheeks, etc. But I'd like to think I handled it as professionally as possible. Story 20. Similar, I was tasked with entering every room in a small hotel to verify dimensions for an architectural project. One room, 2 men who looked like they're from the 80s clearly doing some sort of business, computers, printers, filing cabinets. But there was also some serious adult film on the TV. Story 21. When I did pest control, I had a house I serviced where 3 escort lived. They had poles all over the place and so much glitter everywhere. But they always hooked me up with some really good coffee that one of them got sent from back home. Aside from that, I found a body once. That probably wins for crap I wasn't expecting. Story 22. Wasn't inside their home, but outside. I was on hurricane relief in the mountains of New York. We had to go and supply water to this guy whose house was deep in the woods. His property was surrounded by trees, and hanging from those trees were a bunch of dolls from nooses. There was a wooden archway as you approached his house that said Arbeit macht frei, which means work sets you free. That was on the entrance to Auschwitz. Story 23. I had to work in a government housing block at Main and Hastings in Vancouver. I was cutting a hole in a ceiling while someone was laying on a dirty mattress right beside the ladder injecting substances. The person was so ducked up that he didn't even notice all the drywall dust I was spilling on him. Story 24. Years ago, I drove a tow truck at nights, putting myself through college. Got a call to go get this woman's car. I pull up and she's in the car and won't get out. I ask her, ma'am, to please get out so I can safely tow your vehicle without you in it. She said, that's never going to happen. I said it's an insurance violation for me to let you ride in your car. It's late, so I said, screw it. Ma'am, please move to the passenger seat so I can put your car in neutral and steer it up on the flatbed. She complies. I get in the car and she says, I can't leave them alone in here. I'm like, who? I turn around and there is no joke 30 cats in the back of this old station wagon. Every single one of them in some sort of Halloween costume. The car smelled worse than anything I've ever encountered in my life. Edited. I guess this counts as a home since the crazy cat lady was living in her car. Story 25. Junks everywhere. Sculptures and artwork of junk, literally about 1,000, like a hoarder type situation. I was doing their cable and you really couldn't avoid contact with a junk or two. It was dark in there from the Sky SCR stacks of junk blocking out the light. Story 26. I do property maintenance. One guy has been having problems with his heater recently. The breakers are in the closet on the wall. I've gone in a few times and noticed this huge stack covered by a big blue blanket. The other day, I got curious and took a peek. It was a huge collection of Playboy magazines. It wasn't just one stack either. There were 2 stacks. I'm basically 6 tall. These came up to my chin. I've seen all types of crafty and nasty apartments, but this had me chuckling all day. Story 27. I do property management for multi-millionaires, one of which has a plaque in her house from when she sold her shares in a company in excess of $50 million. Her house is extremely nice, right on the beach, but it's a pretty old house. Inside, everything is pretty old, from the furniture to the wallpaper. She has an abundance of creepy-ass pictures dating back to the 1800s on her walls. On her tables, even cup holders have creepy-looking people on the bottom where you'd put your cup. I imagine it's all old pictures of her family, but it's really bizarre. She also has really old dolls that look creepy as crap, some of them resembling Annabelle from the movie. She has probably 3, 4 in every room in her 5,000 square pounds house. I hate going in there. Story 28. Back in the 90s, I had to install a new computer in the home of a very out and proud gay man who happened to be quite wealthy. The house was decorated very nicely, like lifestyles of the rich and famous. But the weird part was the dude had the brightest white carpet I'd ever seen. My brain stopped when I entered the house, and all I could think of was how I was going to get around without stepping on the floor. Story 29. I was a plumber going through college. While in training, I went to an abandoned home that was being bought by a homeowner. They were trying to use their home warranty system. We entered the house to find that it had been used by squatters until a few weeks previous. The sink was literally overflowing with garbage and mold. The bathroom was also literally overflowing with crap. They didn't have any water, but apparently kept taking dumps in the toilet to the point where it was all over the floor around the toilet. The bathtub and the wall next to the bathtub was covered in mold and crap. Needles all over the place. We took one look at all of it and left. Other than that, I've seen all the stuff you'd normally expect. Hoarders, weed houses, hot moms who want their pipes fixed with a big wrench. But the squatter's house was the worst and weirdest. Story 30. I was a firefighter for 15 years. One time, the code enforcement department called us to assist with condemning a house. The smell was so strong from the street that they knew we needed air packs to enter. The owners were moved to the nursing home and left their dogs behind. Instead of doing anything about it, their daughter just kept throwing bags of dog food in the door periodically. There were 4 generations of inbred dogs in that house, ranging from still nursing puppies to 40-pound adults. I think the final count was in the low 20 when animal control got them all rounded up. The feces was literally inches thick on the floor and splattered knee-high up the walls. You could see the fleas crawling on one guy's khaki pants when he came out. The daughter ended up getting well-deserved animal neglect charges out of it. I think the house got torn down. The weirdest part was the family portraits and knickknacks still on the walls and furniture like they had just left. Story 31. I used to work as a delivery driver in northern Illinois, and there were many times during the winter when I was asked to step in real quick while they looked for the coupon they used on an order or where they put the cash. I remember one time I came into this guy's home, and the whole place reeked of substances. He's wearing a robe and has an unlit cigarette hanging from his mouth as he's looking through drawers trying to find the coupon. I take a quick look around and I see the source of the smell, a giant sack of substances on the counter and a digital scale next to it. Dude was clearly a dealer, but that wasn't what was weird. I've done some pretty weird crap when stoned as well, so I chalked it up to that. I did kind of wish he tipped me in substances instead of cash, but then again, maybe I didn't want anything that possibly was on that scale at some point. Story 32. I used to work at a hauling company just out of high school. Think 1800 got junk from the Hoarders show. We got a call for a couch disposal and showed up at the house. Lady that answered the door was a little strange. We went inside to a gloomy apartment with no lights on and floor-to-ceiling rabbit cages. There must have been 20 cages in her front room alone. All the floors were covered with sawdust and rabbits were everywhere. The whole place, as you would expect, smelled horrible, and flies were everywhere. We walked to the back room, saw the couch just covered in rabbit crap and some lady sitting in a chair in the corner who never said a word to us. We stepped outside, called out boss, and said we weren't going back in without hazmat suits and got the hell out of there. Story 33. I'm a carpenter. I have two that stand out. 1. Client is a judge. She's 40. Unbelievably beautiful, but dresses and acts like a judge. In her bedroom, she has an 8-foot-tall, full-length photograph of herself Mardi Gras nude. So, beads, a crown, a face veil, spinny propellers on her tits, a feather boa sort of covering her navel, fishnets, and silver platform shoes. She's really a great client. 2. Client has a 4-story house. Think Edward Gorey. She has filled it, stuffed top to bottom with antique furniture. You cannot move in there. Her house is so full of furniture, but she wants more. So on top of every surface is a dollhouse, filled with tiny replicas of antique furniture. She also has a teenage son who is addicted to substances. He has a trapdoor that goes to the attic. He lives up there. It has a sleeping bag and is lit with a lava lamp. She is an awful client and gets mad at me when I have to move her things to work. Story 34. This one time I was selling Chicago pizzas for a fundraiser, and I had to go around town to people's houses. I had to use the restroom, so I went to a house and politely asked to use the restroom. A normal-looking lady opened the front door and let me in. She brought me to the bathroom, and I was immediately greeted by a dragon sex toy stuck to the toilet seat. I got done and got the hell out of there. Story 35. I worked at 2 different property preservation companies from about 2006 to 2017. Most properties were single-family homes that were foreclosures. I never went to houses. I looked at photos our contractors took. Highlights: Jabba the Poo. A toilet had broken. Why fix it? Let's put a tarp down around the toilet and poo on the toilet pile until it's like 2 feet high. Cow bathroom. A cow got into a vacant property, ate a lot of the baseboards and stairs, and then got in a bathroom and closed the door on itself. I guess the door was strong because it was found a month or 2 later, decayed into the floor. Puddle cats. I think with the above story, I hopefully do not need to elaborate on that term. They are so common, we use that term in the office. The cage. There was a freaking jail cell built into the corner of the garage in a house in a crappy neighborhood. I'd lived 1 street over a year earlier. We came to the conclusion it probably was related to human smuggling because we never heard on the news about a killer or anything. Fancy house. Sid says this was a 32-room mansion that was seized by some government agency and then sold to an investor. Local kids wrecked the place at least once a month. There must have been $100,000 damage the last time I saw photos from there. Escort room. A doomsday prepper house that had a sign warning of booby traps had a 600 square pounds building that was not permitted on the property. It was accessed by driving over a creek if it hadn't rained too much and wasn't on any paperwork for the property. It had 3 couches, a pole, and compact discs on the wall, for a disco ball effect, I think. Meticulously stolen cheap crap. Several houses had all the light switch covers, outlet covers, tiny stuff like that stolen. I get stealing pipes to sell for scrap, but who is buying secondhand switch covers? I know I have a lot more weird ones. We'll try to remember. Story 36. I was asked to help a guy pack for a move. Showed up to talk to him about the job and saw his living room floor had an 8x8 grid of copy paper boxes, all half packed. He said no one could possibly help him pack because he had a special method. This light bulb, you see, and this cassette tape were both from his apartment in Chicago, 1978. So they went in this particular box with all the other 1978 things. He was correct. No one could help him pack. I had to walk out mid-sentence. He clearly had not been taking his meds. I've seen some rather impressive layering of garbage, animal feces, roach debris, and the like, but that isn't weird anymore. I saw a living room with 2 kiddie pools in it to catch leaks from rain. The pools weren't bailed, but rather just left to evaporate. You can imagine the mold. Another room in this house, the ceiling had fallen in. The door to this room was duct taped shut and a cabinet moved in front of the door. Sadly, this was my parents' house before it was thankfully demolished. Story 37. Dog poop. Everywhere. These people just were too lazy to let the dog out, so the dog just did it on the carpet. And they didn't clean it up. It must have been there for weeks, if not months. Okay, let me be clear. This was in the majority of homes I went into for my job. What was my job? I was in law enforcement, chasing down PETA we found on the internet. We got a search warrant, we went in, we avoided the dog poop, we got the evidence, and we arrested the guy who wouldn't walk his dog downloaded CP from the internet. Story 38. Worked in a guy's house that had a photography studio in it. The walls were covered in erotic pictures of his wife, who would greet us at the front door every morning. Story 39. A phone guy in the early 2008s. I went to this guy's house in Hammond in on a repair call. No dial tone, as in, when he picked up the phone, it was dead, no worky. When I opened the box outside and disconnected the wiring from the house, the line worked just fine. When I told the guy I would need access to the basement to look at the wiring and locating the offending wire, he gave me this weird look. Creepily said, "You need the basement?" I said, "Yes." As we both looked at this door that presumably went to the basement, I noticed it had like 5 to 7 locks on the outside of the door, as if meant to keep something or someone in. He then said, "Is there any other way you could fix it?" I said, short of throwing a cord through the window from the box outside. No, he opted for the cord. I noped the hell out of there as fast as I could. Story 40. I work in ambulance, so I go into homes on the regular to help patients. This one call I had was a routine call. We get to the house, but my 2 buddies went in before I did because I had to grab some things from the rig. Somehow I couldn't find where anybody went. It was a kind of confusing house setup. As I'm going from hallway to room, I thought I found the right door. Mind you, it wasn't a very large house, just a confusing layout. When I opened that door, it was a screen door, but I couldn't see through too well. I walked forward and was immediately met with the largest potbelly pig I have ever seen in person. This chunky boy was massive, cute as could be, but I was very confused and wondering if I'm in the right place. I look around and see 2 birds in a cage and a snake in a cool tank. I swear if somebody saw my reaction, they would have been crying in laughter because I just said, "What the heck? Who's got a big-ass pig inside their house?" After that, I found where everybody went. They too went past the pig room and out a side door. I was confused for a long time as to why they had the pig and animals in the room that connects their house to the outside door. Crazy stuff. I've always wondered what the name of the pig was. 'Twas very cute. Patient was okay, by the way. Story 41. By far the weirdest dude I've ever helped was this bodybuilder who was having a bunch of home theater crap installed in his house. He absolutely would not use Wi-Fi because he believed it was dangerous and wanted everything in the house wired. So there were 4 of us on this job. We get there and he takes us to the basement and there are signs up all over about radiation and to wear eye protection when certain equipment was running. Dude has a tanning bed and a bunch of chemicals that I can only assume were for making steroids or something of that sort. But remember that Wi-Fi is dangerous. Oh, also a sex toy, but honestly, that's just not even on our radar at this point. Later, he asks if we mind if he goes on a walk, and we're like, "Sure man, do whatever," and about 10 minutes later, we realize he's naked in a field behind his house doing Tai Chi. Dude has neighbors. He is not that far away from people to be doing that. Towards the end of the appointment, we're setting up an account for something, and he needs to create a password. He decides to ask me how my name is spelled, and use my name as his password. My name is not unusual, but it is a name that can be spelled many ways, so I'm sure that works super well for him. We finally finish and are just about to get out of this place when he suddenly darts out of the house and waves us down. He apparently has a tradition of letting guests choose a marble from a table filled with marbles. We all pick a marble just to appease him. He tells me I can have a second one if I like. I declined on account of not wanting to make my coworkers jealous. Story 42. My husband works a job where he goes into customers' houses to do furniture protection and carpet cleaning. We live in a big city, so most of his gross stories involve bugs, usually roaches, inside people's houses, and are typically under the area rug or couch he is there to service. But his best story is of a lady he had to visit several times, multiple pieces of furniture being serviced over a period of time, and the last time he visited her, he said the apartment smelled like rotting, sickly poo. She apologized for the smell and explained that the cat had been sick recently and was crapping everywhere in the apartment, and she herself had been too sick to clean it up. So there were just little rotting piles everywhere that he says were like little crap landmines that he had to avoid stepping on. But as an appropriate one-up story, my husband's best friend does the same job as him, and his best story is similar to my husband's. Best friend gets to the customer's house, sees a couple of little crap landmines in the corner and says, "Oh, I think your cat may have had an accident over here." And customer says, "Oh no, that was me. I forgot to put my diaper on this morning." Story 43. For a summer job, I worked for an appliance delivery and installation company, so we would go inside with the machines and hook them up after removing the old ones. My coworker and I were doing a standard dishwasher hookup and removal for a guy who had to be 65. While I was hooking up the drain hose and my coworker was taking the old unit outside, the guy said to me, "When you called, I was practicing my hobby. I'm an escape artist." I knew it could get weird fast, so I didn't question it. When my coworker came in, the guy took out handcuffs and said to him, "Put these on me and I'll get out." He left the room and minutes later was free. He said, "Now let me find some rope," had my coworker tie up his arms and cuff him again. He left the room and was free minutes later. This was our last stop, and we just wanted to get out of there, so I finished installing while he got the paperwork ready, and I told him I'd load the junker into the truck and wait for him. About 10 minutes later, coworker comes out and says, "Yo, you gotta see what this guy had me do." I go in there and the guy is in the cuffs, tied up in a sleeping bag with a moving blanket duct taped around him. We waited in the kitchen, and 5 minutes later, he came out all free and very sweaty. It was actually kind of impressive, and the guy seemed happy to have help with the traps and being able to entertain people. But that was the weirdest experience I had on that job. Story 44. Repossession is part of a finance company. I do sales, but part of that is delivery and unfortunately repossession. I have seen some disgusting houses, but the weirdest and worst has to be this couple with a young child who were just piling used nappies in the corner of their house. Not like a 5 or 6, but like mountain of used diapers, just in one corner like it was the allocated diaper corner. The smell was unbearable. Nearly threw up walking though the door. We left the goods at the house, as it was a health risk. The rest of the house was just as disgusting, like used dishes, ashtrays, fast food rubbish, etc. They honestly looked unfazed by it. Story 45. I worked with my dad for a few years at his appliance business. He would do sales, repairs either in the shop or a client's homes and deliveries. One time, me and my dad walked into this apartment that we had to do a service for due to their dryer going out. We walked in, and the first thing we noticed was this harsh smell of weed in the air. 2 couches in the living room, both being occupied. One couch had a gentleman smoking his lungs off, and the other had a guy who was passed out cold with a lighter in his hand. A guy who I'm assuming was her husband was sitting at a dinner table right in front of the dryer we were going to be working on, and the whole time this lady is in our ear yelling at us that the dryer isn't working. And that the last time we came out to fix it all, we did was spray WD-40 on it. But mind you, this is the first time anybody from the company has been called to her house. But she insisted that it was someone from my dad's business that did it. My dad at this point is trying to talk her down and tell her that the only time we've dealt with her is when we sold her the unit. But she's not having it yelling at us with the smell of substances on her breath. And at this point, her husband got angry and he's over here threatening to beat us. And then the couple's 12-year-old comes at us talking smack, and they followed us all the way to our car, and we drove off, and that was that. Story 46. Old apartment landlord fired the it guy, so I paid half rent for about 10 hours of work a month. Usually little stuff like swapping ports or running cable. The occasional office it, but nothing bad. Anyway, I had to go into an apartment because one tenant complained about his wall jacks. I walked in and this place was filthy. First thing I see was the mattress room. All of the floor and walls were mattresses. Like gross brown stained mattresses. Wait, there's more. The back room is full of like weird cardboard constructions with running computers built into them. Like a cardboard case made out of pizza boxes. I'm talking $4,000 easy worth of decent parts. It was maybe 3 separate machines. This idiot had to be mining using open air machines. I left thinking to myself, what in the heck did I just see? It redefined mind duck for me and made me question my own sanity. Oh, and I worked for an eviction company in college. Evicted a meth head who kept his guns safe in his kid's room. My supervisor asked the cop if any guns were inside. The cop was like, well, no guns. But maybe $200,000 worth of met, then my super says, nah, no way that thing held $200,000 worth of met, to the cop. Not as weird as the computer mines, but equally troubling. Story 47. I did moving for a summer. My coworker came up to me and told me I had to see what was written on the wipe-off board of this old rich couple we were moving. Sex toy were on a shopping list in big, bold letters and had a circle around it. So either this old couple were exploring a bit, or they were purposely messing with us. Story 48. It wasn't part of my job, generic it guy, but I was once ordered by the owner of the small company I worked for to go to his house and install his cable and internet. The following things happened. His beauty, queen wife, early 40s, lots of surgeries, met me at the door in her bathrobe but reasonable nightwear underneath. She and her husband were in the middle of a divorce and she was a little drunk at 10 a.m., which was normal according to the office gossip. She flirted with me a couple times, but I'm not much to look at, so I think she sobered up enough to pass. That makes me feel sad thinking about it. I entered the room where his son keeps all his crap. This was the late 2000s and he had every gadget, doodad, and expensive thing a teenage boy could want. The place was a damn mess with stuff I couldn't afford, but that he had carelessly thrown about. His 15-year-old daughter was passed out drunk on the couch of the living room. She had a half-empty bottle of wine on the floor and a blank over her face. Like her mother, she too had a known, aka gossip, drinking problem. I ended up connecting everything, setting up the wireless, and calling the cable company. It took me about 2 hours to complete, but I felt so dirty being in that house and not being able to unsee what happens when horrible people get a lot of money. Story 49. Used to work for my dad when I was a teenager. Plumbing, electrical work, jack of all trades things. We go to this elderly woman's house to replace her dining room floor. The entire time we're in there, we're being watched by what I can only describe as a taxidermist's attempt at being Frankenstein. It was a raccoon head, cat body, dog legs, ferret paws, and skunk-tailed thing. She was very proud of it. Story 50. When managing an apartment building, I walked into a tenant's studio apartment to check on an issue he had called about. With the sliding door to his balcony, he and his girlfriend were lying naked on a mattress on the floor together under a bedsheet, with a massive juice and pube-covered sex toy next to it. There was also a large hydro grow system on the kitchen floor. We literally had to step over them on the mattress to get to the door they wanted checked. Didn't bother them a bit. Aside from that, some of the filth I've seen is stunning, and these were high-rent places in Los Angeles. Lots of substances and sex toy have been left out as well. People are damn weird. Story 51. I'm the homeowner in this story. Had my bachelorette party. My friends got my blow-up sex doll and put my fiance's face on it. They then handcuffed it to me and put a bunch of fake tattoos on it. After the party, I threw it in my basement. Electrician came and saw it. I'm not sure if he wanted to laugh or if he thought I was a giant weirdo. Oh, and my husband was the one who was home who had to look him in the eyes. Story 52. Was a computer tech in my early 20s in rural Midwest. Have many a story, but highlights. 1. Went to a hog farm to fix a camera system only to find footage of the pens, which had toilets and beds in them. 2. Got called to an apartment to install a camera. Apartment has nothing in it except a bench press where the dining table should be and bedroom furniture. I spent 30 minutes setting up a crafty Chinese hidden camera while he stands right behind me, breathing heavily as I navigated his computer, just praying I didn't stumble onto something bad. 3. Went to house in the city, got left there. An old dude's sister, or whoever starts telling me the future is coming and that she saw me in a dream, walks away, and when I finish and am about to leave, she walks out naked and says, "I need you to do this for me." Straight up takes my hand and tries to spit on it. I was like, no, I don't want dude to come back and hit me. She was a 7 out of 10 too, so it wasn't worth the risk. Also, way too many people keep their history visible. Absolutely insane how many teachers, judges, cops, and doctors I've found with fake adult films. They always act super homely on the outside, perfect conservatives. Lessons learned from leaving Midwest. Never trust conservatives. Story 53. Sex dolls and parts. In every flat surface of the home, hanging from racks, mirrors everywhere. Hoarding situations. Lots and lots bedbugs. Giant mother duckers with squish and smears on every wall, ceiling, flat surface. A lady boiling an entire sheep's head on the stove with various unskinned parts scattered around actual Wiccan circle placed in the flooring with the altar and candles, boxes, etc. Set up. Actual spells in progress. Gaming-addicted caregiver who wouldn't leave his station so the entire home was a trash pit. But all the collectibles dusted and cleaned in pristine condition while the human in actual need sat in old diapers covered in feces. Person living in a camper with only water hookup with toilet, bath, and sinks full of excrement, willing to have the RV dumped, cleaned, or repaired for free to make it livable. So much food waste and pet excrement that the flies bred to such a density that we had to perform service outside. And even then, the actual person was covered in maggots to the extent it took a half hour to actually perform our job. Story 54. I once went into an apartment shared by 4 gay men, went to work on the shower. They had one of those 4-tiered shower caddies that have a spring and sit inside the shower with pressure on the tub and ceiling. I kid you, not each row had 2 sex toys of varying size and color. It was like a magic rainbow junk tree. Story 55. Used to be a massage therapist that took house calls. I once went to a very well-to-do neighborhood and the 12-bedroom house that came with it. The job was a simple hour-long stress relief massage. I get there, and an older woman, who was still quite attractive, greeted me in a very short, revealing robe. No issue, as most of my clients went nude anyways. I do wish it was done in a more professional way. She leads me to the front room, which was huge. The first thing I notice is above the fireplace was a huge hand oil panting of a dog. Those white fluffy ones. Wow. Okay. That was probably an expensive paint job. I am led to the room where I will perform the massage. The room was made for a dog. It was a small round dog bed, complete with a frame and steps. It even had a small kid dresser that looked like it was dog clothes. A small dog chest with toys. Picture of dogs and parks on the walls. And it even had an attached bathroom. I didn't go in there. I set up my table and braced myself. Yep. I was asked to massage the dog, as it was very stressed out. I think the dog was just comfortable to the point of lazy, but what do I know? Story 56. I do appliance repair. I walked into this mansion in West Austin, and in the kitchen was 20 Persian cats. They lived in there, and were not allowed to leave. Cat beds everywhere. Granted, this was a huge kitchen, but 8 cat beds on the island. Cat beds on every surface possible, and the smell. I was covered in hives in 10 minutes. Story 57. The homeowners had 3 dogs in the basement while the rest of the house was getting worked on. We would have to go down there to run new circuits for the kitchen, as it was the only access. They wouldn't let the dogs out, and there were piles of piss and poop everywhere. The smell alone was disgusting, but the fact we had to work around or in it made me want to throw up. Story 58. Solar installer here. Installed the system on an outbuilding at a home with lots of sport bikes in the driveway, a couple of 4x's in project status, and some Dale Earnhardt collector stuff in said outbuilding, including leather love seat, jackets, and a full stock car. We're on the roof, doing our thing when a garbage truck shows up to empty a dumpster that belongs to the home. The driver waves. Not to be unfriendly, coworkers and I wave back. Dude comes over, identifies himself as homeowner. Randy Johnson vibes mullet, big stash, fast-looking sunglasses. He explains how to get to the restroom and tells us to get some Mountain Dew from the soda machine in his room. At lunch, I go through his room to the restroom to rock a piss. Can't help but notice more NASCAR stuff, camo bedspread, hunting photos. On the way back out, I grab a Mountain Dew from the set-to-free vending machine. Can't help but notice the wall of adult films, DVD next to the machine. Not trying to shame, all for people loving and being satisfied by whoever. Story 59? When I worked as a Thudic support staff and went into the homes of my clients, one of the weirdest things I encountered was scrambled eggs everywhere. The scrambled eggs were in every room and on every surface. I could not find a place to sit down and do work with my client without first having to clean up a pile of scrambled eggs. That was almost 5 years ago, and I'm still upset about it. Story 60? Worked ambulance for a spell. My partner needed to use the bathroom before we transported a stable, elderly patient. Using the bathroom in a patient's house is widely regarded as an oh damn, no, I'd rather crap on myself deal because A, people are gross, and B, people are weird. This particular little old lady's house is clean, albeit decorated with many creepy figurines, but my partner was on a juice cleanse and couldn't hold it and decided to hit the can. I ask him to look around to see if any of her meds are in the bathroom because she's unclear of the name of her BP medicine, and I want to be able to have a complete list for the ED. He comes out alarmed and just points to the bathroom. Lil old lady had one of those tall storage racks that go above your toilet with 4 shelves. Every single one of those shelves were filled with rows and rows of jars. Every jar was jam-packed with nail clippings, absolutely packed with nail bits. It was damn revolting to see just bits and bits and bits of yellow brittle nails just chilling in the open for anyone to see. Lil old lady became Lil creepy baby so fast. Story 61. Not me, but a story from my trainer at this particular job. For a short period of time, I worked for a popular tech support company, and sometimes our clients would schedule appointments for one of us to come to their home and work on their computers, printers, etc. During our training, another agent was telling a story about the worst house he'd ever been to for an in-home, and it is as follows. He knocked on the door, only to be greeted by the sound of many locks unlocking, and the client just barely opened the door enough to speak with the agent. Feeling that things were awry, he came back to the facility, only to be told to return to the house. Upon his return, the gentleman was more open to letting the agent enter his home. When the agent walked in the door, the entire house was covered in feces from head to toe, and the man was wearing a tuxedo that was also covered in feces. The agent made a 180 back to his car, and now that client is no longer allowed to schedule in-home appointments. Story 62. I work for a utility company and have to relight appliances after shutting the gas off. I walk in and ask the customer where all the appliances are. He points to the basement without saying a word, dead-eye staring me down. I awkwardly fight my way past a crap ton of boxes and down into this unfinished basement. Strapped to this rickety table is a cat spread eagle. I wince and go about my business. The cat is clearly passed away, and when you're in a customer's house, don't ask questions. Do the work, get out. I ask as I walk up the stairs. Did you know there's a cat with an IV strapped to your table? The customer, without looking up from his bowl of Foot Loops, says, I failed my practical app lab for school I'm practicing. Weirdest experience, noted on his address for future workers. Story 63. I deal with subsidized housing once in a while. One house I inspected, which was thankfully vacant, had writing all over the walls and ceilings. Mostly random numbers and letters, nonsensical equations, and stuff about the axis of evil. It creeped me out. One house my coworker visited had a bunch of machetes laid out on the basement floor. Story 64. I work in home health. I was brushing one of my patients' hair one morning. First morning I worked for this particular woman, and put the brush down on the side table so I could braid her hair. She said, wait, go to my dresser and get my hair bag, please. I said, what's a hair bag? And walked to the dresser. Top drawer, she says. I open it up and sure enough, there sits a Ziploc bag full of hair clumps. She asked me to pull the hair from the brush and put it in the bag. I asked her why she was keeping it and she said, I've been saving my hair since I was a girl. It's all in the closet. Go look, it's beautiful. I opened the closet to find an entire shelf with various sizes of Ziploc bags full of hair, dozens of bags, going from dark brown to light brown, and then to varying shades of gray and white. Beautiful was not the first word that came to my mind. Story 65. I used to have to do home visits for families with preschoolers. This was in a tiny apartment where the kids had no beds and slept on mattresses on the floor with no sheets. One wall of the living room was a massive fish tank. The other wall was a massive flat-screen TV. Each item took up the entire wall on its side. I was in another apartment where there were tons of kittens, one giant cage and nothing else. No litter box, no furniture. I have no idea where the kids slept or why there were so many kittens. They were cooking there were pots and pans and food on the stove, but it was so bizarre. One of the reasons for home visits was to determine eligibility for services, like furniture vouchers, for example, or Medicaid. But the main reason was so we could make sure the kid could go to our free program because it was only available to residents of that city. At least if you're lying about living in a place, have some of the kids' stuff there? Story 66. Did the renovation in an apartment after an eviction. I was the first one into the house after they left. They had a pile of garbage 4 feet high in the living room, which is actually more common than you would think, especially after an eviction. The thing that was jarring was the first bedroom. It was obviously a kid's room. The kids had drawn on the walls, and you could tell there was more than one kid, and they could only be about 5 max because of the height of the drawing on the walls. The closet smelled like piss, and the door had the turned around so it locked from the outside. It was very obvious they would lock their kids in the room alone. I took pictures and sent them to the building manager to give the authorities, but I'm not sure what came of it. It was sad. Story 67. Still working as a supervisor for a construction company. Saw my fair share of weird stuff due to some back jobs due under warranty. All the walls in one house were wet. Waterproofing system failed, and one storm turned the house into an aquarium. Dismantling the ceilings revealed what could only be considered a mushroom farming operation. All the trash from a typical hoarder home due for demolition. I naively thought that sort of thing only happened on TV. Story 68. Delivery guy here. Not super interesting, but something. I don't really go inside people's houses, but I go to their front doorstep. I went to this one huge house before, and the guy who opened the door was not what I expected. He was very obviously a substances user. I got no problem with that. As long as you don't affect my life, you do what you want. He opened the door and had baggy eyes and long brown hair and was really skinny. He signed the check and gave me $15, which was nice, but what I saw in the house was damn crazy, but also kind of cool, I guess. I saw a TV that was bigger than anything I've ever seen in my life. He had a painting on the wall as well of what looked like a younger version of him and what I'm guessing to be both of his parents. It was obviously painted, but it looked really nice. Story 69. He worked food delivery for almost 10 years. Usually didn't enter the house, but there was always exceptions. There was a brothel I delivered to once or twice a week, and the chick who answered the door had a semen spot on her cheek that she missed when cleaning up. Weirdest, "You've got something on your face," I ever said. Story 70. Wasn't technically a home, but a motel these two middle-aged, very tweaky gentlemen were residing. We got the call, walked inside, and went into the bathroom where one of them was laying somewhat conscious on the floor. T-shirt, no pants, no underwear. Lovely. As I knelt down to assess him, I noticed a milk crate to my left underneath a desk. It was full of various sized and shaped sex toy. Lots and lots of sex toy. Tack this onto the mound of burnt spoons in the sink. Needless to say, these dudes knew how to party. Story 71. Oh, I'm sad I missed this. Hopefully it won't get too buried. Electrician here. I did some remodels in Section 8 housing as an apprentice. The most amazing thing was the swing between people who kept immaculate apartments and ones that were just infested with garbage and bugs. The worst was a filthy one, reeked of substances. 2 high on women on the couch when we came in. Explained what we needed to do, but no one cared. While we were working, someone pounded on the door. When the tenant opened it, 3 men came in, picked up one of the women on the couch, and beat her. Nothing we could have done even if we wanted to. We had to hang out and wait for cops to come and give a statement, etc. That was a bad day. Story 72. Haven't personally experienced it yet, but any police officer or ambulance that's been in enough houses inhabited by hardcore meth addicts can tell you that a lot of times you'll find tons of off-the-wall adult magazines and crazy sex toys. Sometimes, to quote a police sergeant I know, attached to the wall and still wiggling, ducks up the endorphin receptors of the brain to the point where the harder someone gets hooked on it, the more crazy crap they have to do to have any kind of feeling of pleasure. Hence, an increased appetite for increasingly wilder adult film. Story 73. I used to babysit for 2 kids, and the first time the parents had left a dildo and a ball gag out on their dresser, and the other time I ejected a CD to put in a movie for the kids, and out came with an adult film CD. I also worked as a pet sitter, and while cleaning a cat's litter box in the basement, I came across a wall covered in Post-it notes describing paranormal events that had happened in their house with dates. Super creepy. Story 74. I don't think I've seen too many weird things compared to just gross things. I've seen 500-pound brothers who were Wonder's house was beyond stacked with trash. Everything they could barely move due to their weight alone. And when you throw in all the objects, it made it that much harder. We would get called all the time to their house because one of them would trip and fall and they couldn't get up. Had a lady have a heart attack while she was pleasure herself. When I was in Blythe, there was countless addicts whose houses were just 5 inches thick of animal feces and cockroaches. Prior paramedic. Don't think I saw too many weird things? Grandma's weird collectible stuff? Story 75. I used to deliver furniture. I went into an older lady's home and picked up the old mattress to be thrown out. Under the bed was an old, bulky sex toy. She said it was a back massager and threw it into the closet. Story 76. I used to work as a fire safety technician, meaning I put the little cardboard certification tags on your fire extinguishers. I had to enter a lot of apartments and saw a lot of weird stuff, but maybe the weirdest was the customary knock 3 times. No answer. Use the master key to enter, walk in, and dude is standing in his living room pissing on the wall. Waves me in the direction of the extinguisher. I inspect and tag, and as I'm walking out, he is still peeing on his own living room wall. Also found a passed-away woman on the steps of an elementary school a few hours before students were ready to arrive, which was incredibly depressing, and also caused me a long delay because for questioning. Story 77. Well, the guy who walked into our home had quite a story to tell. The ventilation in our bathroom made a weird notice for some time, so my parents had a repairman come over. When he was done, he gave my mom a letter. Turned out my dad was having an affair and forgot he hid the love letter over there. Story 78. My dad does electrical and HVAC work. Went with him to install new kitchen appliances. Door opened. Tenant was shooting an adult film in his bedroom. Me being the 18-year-old could not hide my excitement. My dad told the guy we could not do it with multiple people in the unit. Had to come back. This was almost 15 years ago, and I still bring it up to this day. Story 79. I worked as maintenance man in Australia and have met some really interesting people. One woman had not lights, just candles, and said the shadows are from the spirit world. Another time I was sent to fix front door handle. When I got there, the door and frame was missing, and the owner was burning it all in the front yard. Story 80. This one is epic. I once visited a villa to set up a surveillance system. The client was a multimillionaire, so I am done with setting up the system, and the owner invites me to be a spectator for a private performance he had organized. My stupid ass said yes, just so that I can score on some exotic champagne. Turns out this private performance is of midgets performing live sex. 7 of them, to be precise. I quickly excused myself. The image still haunts me. Rich people are damn weirdos. Story 81. I measure windows, and one customer wouldn't let me in this one room in their home. It was a second-floor window. I didn't have a ladder with me, and I wasn't going to be able to complete my appointment without getting in that room to measure. Finally, the customer relented and told me that their elderly mother had passed away in that room last night and was still in there. I let them know the office would be contacting them to reschedule whenever they were ready and got the hell out of the house. Story 82. Back when I worked for a moving company, majority of our moves were military members. Husband was deployed, so it was just the wife and her 2 little ones and their dog. They were in a room to stay out of the way and let us pack. So literally almost everything we picked up was in a banana shape. Junk-shaped cookie cutters, junk-shaped bottle, junk-shaped suckers, so much stuff. It was funny because I originally found the suckers and brought it to a coworker just for a laugh. Then he pulls out the cookie cutters and a few other things from the kitchen. It was wild. Story 83. Shivak dude here, doing routine main on local large church. Was told no one was on premises. Was looking for the air handler to change a filter. Walked in on the head priest dude in his boxers with headphones on watching a religious ceremony. Now just picture me opening up the door and barging in and seeing this half-naked dude just chilling watching YouTube. At the time it was a boys' choir or something on screen, so holy crap, what the heck goes through my mind? I see this and just close the door. Story 84. I deliver groceries at home. One of my regular customers has transformed the small entrance hall of her apartment into a giant rabbit wren. It stinks like hell, so I just always drop the stuff off right at the door. Story 85. I install blinds and curtains. So far, the weirdest thing I have ever seen in 7 years would be a woman who decorated the entire second floor of her home with pictures and posters of Hugh Jackman. Movie posters, newspaper clippings, photos of him. Photos of him and her at fan meet and greets. I counted over 30 posters and well over 100 framed photos, many of them being signed. Stacks and stacks of the playbills you get at the door, but only of plays that Hugh was in. Story 86. I work a vac, so I usually greet customers at the door. I once arrived to a gentleman's house and he opened the door to shake my hand. So I did. I immediately realized how soft this hand was, but didn't think anything of it. So I proceed to find the attic loft. I live in a state that uses attics instead of basements, and I glance over at this man's CPU and see him watching adult film with a bottle of lotion next to his monitor. Story 87. I used to work as a door-to-door salesman. Got fired for not making any sales. But my boss went into an elderly lady's home, and in the kitchen was a bright pink sex toy in the sink. We needed the sink for the demonstration. Well, when he needed to dump the water, he asked if she could clean out the sink, thinking she forgot she had it in there. She just moved it without skipping a beat. It came out somehow. That was what she used for a drain plug. Story 88. Large, well-manicured homes in fancy, well-to-do neighborhoods that were hoarders' nests on the inside, filled with stacks of old newspapers and magazines, all covered in a fine patina of animal fur, and filled with the slight stench of dead rodents and piss. Homes in bad neighborhoods that were not well kept outside and completely immaculate inside. Not a single speck of dust to be found. Floors so clean you could serve a meal on them. Story 89. Not so much weird as gross. I clean houses for a living, and this one house we do bi-weekly never fails to have dirty, stained thongs thrown all over the house. On the stairs, the bathroom floor, the kitchen floor, etc. I know I'm supposed to be cleaning, but you'd think people would have the decency to pick up their nasty underwear. Wouldn't you be embarrassed having strangers see that? Story 90. Friend of mine works building inspections for insurance companies. He had to inspect someone's basement, but the homeowner would not accompany the inspector to said basement. Homeowner said, "The light switch is right at the bottom." So the inspector reached his hand into the dark basement and was bitten by a human. He heard a loud moaning shriek followed by the biter falling out of a wheelchair and running out of the house. He turned on the light, and the homeowner got mad that the inspector let his brother out of the house. Story 91. Didn't actually go inside. But the day the morbidly obese nudist couple who called for pizza delivery weekly added a gigantic gerbil habitat I could see through the sliding glass door as I delivered their food was a bit off-putting. Story 92. A gimp suit and a recently used very large three-pronged sex toy. Now that's not that weird, but what is weird is that the client was my mother's psychiatrist. I did not know that until after I had done the job. Story 93. Worked as a pizza guy. Crack vial on the coffee table. Worked as a handyman. Old lady had never her drain connected to the kitchen sink. Entire floorboard had rotted out of her cabinet below. Work at a recycling plant. We got a lot of house cleanouts. So much adult film and liquor. Once a guy's substances plants came through the line. A friend of mine found $3,000 one day. Definitely the best job of the three. Story 94. I'm in property management, so I've seen some weird things. Collections of dolls, mega hoarders. One super gross thing I saw recently was a house where they were trying to do an appraisal, and the smell from outside was so bad they wouldn't go in. So we went in and it turns out the house was covered. Everything. I can't make this up. With dog crap. Another, we did an inspection and this family had a sex swing in their dining room. Story 95. I work in the community mental health field, so I visit my clients in their homes. We had one guy who was getting evicted, so we had to clean out his apartment. We had to rent a dumpster to get rid of all the crap in his studio apartment, including 3 car bumpers. It was on the 3rd floor. Super narrow stairway, but he got the bumpers in there. We ended up throwing them out the window into the dumpster. Story 96. I asked this of the guy that came to dismantle my pool table once. He said he went to repair the felt on a table at an NFL player's mansion. The police had cut a patch from the felt as part of an abuse investigation. Story 97. I inspected an apartment for a property transaction. After getting pre-cleared to go into Paula's apartment, we entered and greeted Paula and her husband, Paul, who were sitting on the couch when we arrived. Paul was a sex doll. The apartment super acted like everything was fine and normal. We made pleasantries with Paula and Paul, inspected the apartment, and left. Not a word of it was spoken after. Story 98. I've worked a lot of jobs which required going into people's houses. One of the highlights was this one dude's house. Adult magazines everywhere. Everywhere. All of the walls, doors, all of the counter space was covered in adult magazines. My favorite one, though, was a regular picture of the Little Mermaid on the door. Story 99. Cleaning out apartments is what I do currently. In one, I found stacks and stacks of the same funeral picture. Not many different angles or anything. Literally one photo printed hundreds of times. There were stacks in drawers, closets, one on the kitchen counter. It was just like, what the heck? To clarify, I clean out apartments no longer being lived in, making them ready for new tenants. Story 100. Delivered alcohol to a dominatrix's house. 2 rooms packed with latex sex toy and sex furniture like swings and benches. Being the degenerate I am, I've gone back there for non-work related matters twice now, but sadly moved states. Story 101. Being a door-to-door salesman. I went in many houses. I sold roofs, and I'll never forget the time we went into a hoarder's house. He said when we take off the old shingles, we can just leave them in his living room and not to dispose of them like we usually do for free. Story 102. Ambulance here. Recently had a call for a guy having an asthma attack. His house was filled with these creepy porcelain dolls. They occupied every bit of furniture in his house. I can't really describe how damn creepy it was. Nice guy, though. Story 103. Maybe the weirdest thing the customer has done. But once I was replacing a wax ring on a toilet, and the customer, being an old man, started getting naked in the bathroom with me. Just talked like it was a casual conversation, butt-ass naked. Didn't even put on clothes after. Paid naked. Story 104. Jars of shrimp and water placed on the windowsills. It wasn't just one mason jar. It was about 20 jar, 32 ounces jars of shrimp and water, and these things were full. They were placed in the windowsills and appeared to just be sitting there to bake in the sun.